So today I'm going to present you what I did for my Division 3 here at Hampshire College. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Bill. I go by Bill, and I have been here for the past 4 years, been studying entrepreneurship and business for the past 2 years. Before I did a little bit of design and a little bit of music and art. And then I started focusing on business and entrepreneurship. And for my Division 3, I decided to do something which is very related to my personal interest, which is in automobiles and vehicles and transportation. And my Div 3 is divided into 2 parts. The first part, the first semester, I did on autonomous trucks and its implication on the trucking industry in America. In the second semester, based off of the research findings that I found, I decided I was interested in, the security aspect of those connected vehicles, commercial vehicles included. So for the first semester, I looked at some basic stuff, the overall landscape of the trucking industry, which includes, what's autonomous vehicles gonna do to the commercial vehicle industry. So the economic benefits it provide, the enabling technologies that's used in those vehicles, what makes automation possible in vehicles, and government regulation, how does that play into the trucking sector, and also its job implications, a little bit touch on the societal impact of those things. Second semester, I did market landscape of security of connected vehicles, and I did a little bit talk about the challenge of securing those vehicles, and I talked about my target market segment, which is the aftermarket telematic devices. And lastly, I talked a little bit about competitors and customers. So let's jump right into what I did for the first semester. Autonomous trucks and its implication on the trucking industry. So here is a interesting number for you guys. 125,000 miles. And that's what a typical driver in trucking sector drives a year annually. That translates to about 1,500 a week or 500 miles a day. And that's a lot of miles when you think about it. There's about 11 hours, 10 hours they're on the road every day, every week. Here's another interesting number. 9.2 billion. And that's the number of the total tonnage being shipped in America through trucks. And interestingly enough, that translates to 30 tons per capita for each person in the United States. I don't know why people would need to ship 30 tons per capita in this country, but that's just a fact. And that also accounts for 67% of the total domestic tonnage shipped. The others are being shipped through sea, through train, but the majority are being shipped through trucks. And that's why it makes perfect sense to say that America is built on trucks. It's built on trucks. Then another number here is 3.4 million. And that's the total amount of drivers in this country, truck drivers in this country in 2014. And that accounts for about 1% of the total US population. And trucking is in fact the most common job in America, and is the most common job in 29 states. And many people consider trucking as one of the last good middle class income job for Americans without a college degree. A typical truck driver, we're looking at about $40,000 a year in wage, and the fleet drivers tend to get paid even more. Drivers for fleets like Walmart and stuff, they tend to get paid like $50,000, $60,000. Some can even get paid $70,000. Speaking of being the most popular job in America, this is a graph from NPR that listed the most common jobs. As you can see, like most of the what's considered the flyover states, they'll have truck driver as the most common job in that state. So we need to. So those drivers, the interesting thing about them being the last good job for America without a college education is because most of the middle class job has been outsourced to foreign countries since a few decades ago. But trucking being its local kind of a thing, like because it's a local nature, there's no way you can ship the job. You can't outsource the shipping and the truck driving job to foreign workers. So that's why it still exists. But the problem here is it's with the enabling technologies in vehicle automation that is about to change. So before we go into a little more about vehicle automation, I'd like to show you this graph that's considered by most in the industry as the standardization of categorization of automation in vehicles. There are 5 levels, or actually 6 levels. Being the first level, the level 0 is any normal car where a driver have to assume all controls at all times. Then when you go into level 1, this is where it gets interesting. Many of the auto manufacturers these days are starting to release new vehicles on the market with a level 1 kind of assisted driving kind of thing, where you incorporated what is it called? Adaptive cruise control, where it can keep the following distance of the vehicle in front of you on the highway, or some kind of lane keep assist. This is already on the market. Many cars already have them. That doesn't even have to be luxury cars at this point. Like many Hyundais and new Toyotas, they all have those kind of features now. And when we go up to second level, this is where cars where you hear about autopilots on Teslas, and some of the newer Mercedes, they have those kind of things where the car can, you're allowed to take your hands temporarily off the wheel. You still have to assume the control, but you can take your hands temporarily off the wheel, and the car will stay in the lane and follow the car in front of you for a set distance before the thing gets disengaged. So that's partial automation, where the stuff you can still buy on the market. And then when we go into level 3 is, where companies like Uber and Google are testing in California and Nevada in those states, where it's a non-monitored driving, meaning you can take your hand off the wheel in certain conditions for a prolonged period of time. You don't have to pay attention to the road at most times, but you still have to resume to control in a reasonable amount of time if the car requires you to. Then there's level 4, where it's mostly automatic and drivers are not required. Doesn't mean you can fall asleep just yet, but for the most part, you can go around and do other things like type out an email, start doing other things before the car will be able to handle most situations, like 99.9% of situations. And then there's level 5, where no steering wheel is required. There's no driver input. Usually cars like this is fully autonomous, and there's no way for you to control the vehicle. It's fully computer controlled. And we don't have anything from 3 to 5 that you can buy on the market yet, but they're coming out really soon. Tesla's promising by 2017 they can achieve level 3, and the car can go from California from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast to New York, all by the car itself. It's coming really quick. So before we jump back into a driverless truck that I show up here, I want to bring up a few government regulation issues here. So one of the big problems for the trucking industry is hour of service. I wouldn't say a problem, but that's one of the major challenge for the trucking industry. The FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, requires a driver to drive no more than 11 hours a day for safety reasons. And driver have to keep all kinds of logs and stuff with them to show that they have not over-operated over that amount of hours. So with that said, most of the trucks, half the time during the day, they're parked and not moving about. And for fleet managers, that's they're considered a cost because their assets not moving on the road, they're not producing any income for them. But they have to deal with it. That's just the rule, and it makes sense. You don't want a driver to be operating fatiguely, for 24 hours straight. It just doesn't work that way. And there's ways to work around that. You can have a team of drivers to drive, trade off and stuff. But then you have to put 2 drivers on the road. You have to pay both of them. So it doesn't, it's kind of a problem for the trucking industry. So what autonomous truck can do to this is, and there are companies actually trying to prove to the government right now, that with advanced driver assistance features, a driver can safely operate for longer hours because the truck is taking care of all the driving, and the driver can rest and do other stuff on the highway, so they can operate safely for longer. So what you're seeing here on the wall is this company, Auto, that has recently did a automated delivery, the world's first automated delivery in Colorado. They delivered 500 cans of Budweiser beer in Colorado over, I think, 90 miles. They did it at night with 2 patrol police vehicles surrounding the truck just to make sure everything goes smoothly. And as you can see, the driver was actually sitting in the sleeping berth. He was not. He was in the back of the truck. He was not really operating, sitting behind the wheel. And one of the news articles was actually really interesting because the truck was fully lit up inside when it happened. One of the driver doesn't know what's going on, drove past and turned over and saw no one sitting in the driver's seat. And his face was like completely horrified when he saw that. And he called the police department afterwards, and the police told them, oh, actually we were just helping them, doing this test. And so it's actually happening already, and the technology is mostly there. And they have to, companies like Alto and other autonomous vehicle startups, they have to work through, a lot of government regulations in order to bring this actually to the market. And obviously they have to make the techniques more mature so they can be 100% reliable 100% of the time. We're not quite there yet, but it's something we're getting to. So the benefit is obvious, right, for adoption of autonomous trucks, because drivers, the other thing that fleet managers are concerned with is the security of those vehicles, the safety of those vehicle drivers. When you drive that long for an amount of miles on the highway, you get tired, you fall asleep, or you get distracted texting on your phone and stuff, which I see all the times on the highway by truck drivers. Humans just tend to make more errors than computers. And with another set of eye on the road, with the vehicle, the computer taking control over the driving, we'll find out, we'll see that it's actually much safer for computers than human drivers to operate a vehicle, any vehicles really. And there's also very clear economic benefit for fleet managers. Trucking, you have to pay drivers. The trucking sector, the way it works, is very thinly margined. There's about 7% profit margin in the market in 2015, and 40% of the cost of the business, the expense for those fleets are to paying drivers' wages, compensation, and benefits and stuff like that. And I'm not saying now that trucking jobs are going to be disappearing in the next 10 years or so, but we're going to start to see a trend where drivers are getting to get paid less. There will be less driver shortage. The wage is going to start to slowly go down with more and more advanced driver assistance feature on the trucks, eventually going into full automation. And truck drivers' role is also going to evolve too with that, because now they're not on the highway, they're not driving. They'll be taking care of other duties, such as working with the clients on logistics and stuff like customer service and stuff like that. So they're not going to be truck drivers essentially anymore. And there's also going to be needing people to do maintenance and fueling up and stuff like that. And automation is interesting because on the highway it's easy to have a truck driving straight in between the 2 lanes, but it's much, much, much harder when you're on the what's called the last mile problem. When you get off the highway, you have to maneuver the street of LA. And there's a lot of traffic, a lot of really tight maneuvering where your computer just are not there quite yet. So, a truck driver is still needed in the short term, but it's gonna, the things are gonna, start to evolve where drivers don't need to do both the driving on the highway. The other problem with that is being the most common job in America. Truck drivers being the most common jobs in America, in the 29 states anyway. It's important to understand where those jobs are going to go to, because once you have a computer to replace those jobs, like what are those going to people do, or where are they going to live off of, and because there will be essentially no middle class job left, good middle class job left in this country. That's 1% of the population we're talking about here, and that has a pretty big significant impact on the society as a whole. So it's not really related to my research studies, but I came across stuff such as what is called known as technological socialism, where you have to where everyone get what's called a universal basic income, where everyone get paid a set amount of money by the government. It doesn't matter how much money you make, doesn't matter if you have a job or not. You always get a set base number of money, just to ensure everyone can meet their end demand and stuff. But that's a topic for another day. I'm not going to go too much into that. So, from doing my research on trucking industry and its problems, the automation, what it's going to bring to the trucking industry, one of the problems I came across in that research was that security, specifically, cybersecurity in those vehicles is one very overlooked aspect. And you guys heard about the recent incident of the ransomware that attacked all the computers across the country, across the world. It's not, nothing has happened luckily for us to the connected vehicles we have on the road today. There's no major high-profile incident that happened that killed people or destroyed assets or anything. But it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And it's very overlooked. Everyone's, the news is reporting, the exciting technological development of autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles, but no one's caring about cybersecurity as much these days. So, which I decided, my second semester, I'm going to do research on this. So, cars used to be simple mechanical machineries. Things start to change around the 80s when manufacturers start to equip vehicles with electronic control units, ECUs, for better dependability and functionalities. And since the 80s, there's tremendous amount of technology advancement in electronics in vehicles. Today's vehicles, many of them have over 100 ECUs within a vehicle, embedded in a very large network, which is known as the CAN network. They're connected through that way. And so the CAN network itself is a very interesting thing because it was developed back in the 80s. And back then, you don't have to worry about cybersecurity because we're not thinking about connecting cars to the internet and stuff. So security was not one of the things that was designing in mind back in the days on those vehicles. And we'll go back to that later, a little bit later. So the chart you're seeing here is the estimated connected car shipments. In 2016, we have a lot of the cars these days you can buy now are already connected to the internet through cellular and 4G. I'm sure you've seen commercials by Chevrolet where they advertise their 4G LTE as one of the selling thing. Many of the luxurious car makers also provide similar features like that, where you can remotely summon your car and remotely start your car and providing GPS service and all that kind of stuff. The number and sophistication of the cars are quite extraordinary at this point. And they've been more connected to the internet than ever before. So, really interesting thing here. This thing recently happened in New York City, well, in the movie theater anyway. So I went to see this movie, Fate of the Furious, where I thought I got a kick out of this, where this hacker, Cypher, was targeting a Russian minister to hijack a nuclear launch code device in a suitcase. And she instructed her hacker underlings to type off of their keyboards. And in about 30 seconds, she commandeered a herd of vehicles, a herd of zombie cars, to block off the vehicle of the motorcade. And she even ordered cars to fly off the rocks and backed right into the way of the motorcade to block them off. So while granted, Fate of the Furious is not really the most realistic movie of all films. The idea is not completely foreign. The idea is not completely foreign. It's originated actually from 2015, where there was a really high profile of two security researchers, Charlie Miller and Chris Valesque. They demonstrated, they were able to compromise the Uconnect system on Chrysler vehicles. They did this demonstration in a Jeep Cherokee, where one of the auto journalists was driving on the highway, and they were able to remotely cut off the transmission on that vehicle, jack up the volume of the entertainment system all the way up, and kill the engine on the car. Then the person lost all control on the vehicle. He also lowered the window and did a bunch of other stuff. And there's nothing they can do. Like, he tried to turn the volume knob down and start the engine, nothing will work. And actually on the infotainment screen, it showed like two researchers' picture on there saying you've been hacked. The auto journalist obviously panicked. This is on like a major interstate where there's like, a big truck coming behind them on an uphill, and the car just stalled out on the highway like that. This is not a separate incident really, because all the vehicles that's equipped with Uconnect from Chrysler, actually Chrysler offered a massive security recall after this, to update the system software on those vehicles to fix the problem. But this demonstration really brings a lot of people's attention to security in those vehicles. And this is just a demonstration, a show of a proof of concept, but there are other things you can do to the vehicle. You can rev up the engine all the way to destroy the engine itself. You can even take over the steering if the car is equipped with advanced parking assist, like self-parallel park and stuff like that. And you're able to use the steering on the highway just to veer the car right off the road. All kinds of things you can do with those. So because of this, and as I said, vehicles are very, very complicated at this time. Also because the nature of automotive industry, all the parts, all the computers, the ECUs in the vehicles are made by different manufacturers, different suppliers, tier 1 suppliers. And because of that, since there's 100 of them, no one owns the entire source codes of a vehicle. And that makes it really hard to secure the entire vehicle because no one has the total control of the software on the vehicle. So automotive security really requires a holistic approach from top to bottom, and I'll show you the mental model for that in a little bit. Auto ISAC was created because of this. Many auto manufacturers are struggling to understand the cybersecurity implications, and car manufacturers are not really cybersecurity experts by any means. They have not, done many things on this before, and they're trying very hard to, keep up with this. So Auto ISAC was created by a group of leading manufacturers, auto manufacturers, to share as a platform to share information between them. And this is very rarely done actually in the industry because how competitive automotive industry is. You don't usually share your top secrets, your confidential, your intellectual property with other people. But they created this, and it's an indication that really they're trying hard to understand this and don't really understand anything about it. So the formation of ISACs is another indication that the auto manufacturers are trying to struggling to keep up with this. And so here I have a simple mental model to understand what I meant by a holistic approach for automotive cybersecurity. So from the top, you have internet security, where it's it's really like cloud security, where the service that need to detect and correct threats before they even reach the vehicle. So securing the infrastructure at the corporate level, at the server itself, making sure those things are not compromised. And this is a very common thing done, doesn't have to be automotive because every company needs to have that really. Then under internet security, we have the vehicle gateway security is what I call it, where the vehicle, before the data goes into the vehicle, there needs to be a firewall separating the outside world with the inside very vulnerable CAN network within the vehicle. Then under that, there's the internal network security, where there needs to be some kind of intrusion detection prevention system, anomaly detection system that monitors all the traffic flow within the vehicle. And if there's any kind of suspicious activity, we can block it off at that level. And then very, very bottom level, there's the ECU security. You're securing the single, hundreds of ECUs within the vehicle at their local level. So even if, the vehicle network is being compromised, all the aforementioned countermeasures are undermined, you still have some kind of security at those ECU levels. So that's a simple mental model. It's oversimplified, obviously, but that's one way to understand how this thing works. So in my when I was talking about my customers and my competitors, I talked a little bit about where my competitors are. There's a lot of people, a lot of companies, startups working on the internal network security. Many of those companies are based in Israel, and this is a very evolving, emerging market where it didn't exist like even 5 years ago. And there are a lot of companies popping out of everywhere, trying to address this issue. Most of them are working on the internal network security. Some are working on the ECU security and vehicle gateway security. But what I want to focus, my potential company that I'm thinking of starting is to do the telematics systems within the vehicle gateway security. By vehicle gateway security, I really mean anything that has an internet connection to the outside world. And that really it really means two things: infotainment system. Whereas when you buy a car, the car's head units really that's connected to the internet that need to be secured. And by the telematics systems, it's also two-folded. There is the factory installed ones, things like OnStar, made by GM and other companies have different products too. OnStars, you connect those factory installed telematics system and the aftermarket telematics system. By aftermarket telematics system, I mean stuff that's like this. So there are many dongles being sold these days to consumers, also sold by insurance providers and fleet management companies that can be connected to your existing vehicle. And it's connected to your vehicle through this port called OBD2 protocol. And most vehicles after 1996 are required to have them. So essentially what you can do, you can buy this like $50, $100 dongle, plug it into the vehicle, and suddenly it makes your 1996 Buick something become a connected vehicle all of a sudden. And having that, it's basically a gateway to the vehicle's internal network. And those things really do need to be secured because so there was a demonstration made by University of Virginia's researchers where they were working with the state troopers there. They installed one of those telematic devices, and then they were able to control the police vehicle's trunk. They can remotely open the trunk and trigger the windshield wipers and stuff like that remotely. So you can essentially make an older vehicle become vulnerable by plugging one of those devices into it. And a lot of people are doing it these days because companies like Progressive have been offering like one of those things that monitors your driving stats. It depends on how you drive. They give you an insurance discount. If you drive a lot, they don't. If you drive very little and you're a safe driver, they give you a discount. And what you see here is like a fleet management system made by the company OmniTrax, which is installed in trucks to track the hours they drive and track the fuelage they use. You can it's like a fleet management kind of solution made by aftermarket telematics devices providers. And then automatics on the top right bottom is a dongle that you can be purchased in Target, in Best Buy. It's being sold where you can monitor your fuel usage for your personal vehicles. You can use it for tax deduction if you drive for business, and also provide diagnostic functionalities if you have like engine code you need to be cleared out and stuff like that. And Hum is another device that's offered by Verizon that provides a 4G LTE connectivity, to the passengers, and also it can do diagnostic purpose and functionalities and stuff. So those things are the kind of stuff I want to be focused on with the company that I'm proposing. So yeah, that's pretty much my the things I found out in my Div 3 research, and it's been a pretty interesting year for me to do this research because at the beginning I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Then eventually I got to a point where I found out what I need to do. But there's a lot of difficulties getting in touch with customers and my competitors because being a very emerging market, there's not a lot of information out there. A lot of the companies don't have what they're doing, or they're essentially going under radar, and they're not very public about what they're doing. And trying to get into touch with those companies and trying to get in touch with my customers, companies like OmniTrax and Keep Trucking, those companies was turned to be pretty interesting. And being essentially this like a commercial level enterprise software sales kind of thing, it's kind of hard for me to understand how the whole thing. I went into this thing without knowing anything about trucking industry, and I had to really educate myself on a lot of things, just slowly by reading the stuff on the internet and talking with people. But I think I got to a pretty good point where I have a somewhat pretty solid understanding of the truck industry. And one thing I wish I did a little more throughout my 4 year at Hampshire College was if I knew a little more about computer science. I've been taking computer science classes this year, but it's not really. I wouldn't say myself a computer science student or anything, but I wish I have done a little more on computer studies back in my first year. Because technical background is very important. This, along with business development, is very important in building a company. And I'm planning to keep studying on computer science, especially the cybersecurity aspects of computer science, more after I graduate from Hampshire. So thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Yeah, I'll take any questions. I think we have a few more minutes left, if I'm not mistaken. So quick questions. There's any.
What got you into this topic to begin with?
So my personal interest in, I'm a big geek when it comes to cars, and I've been always following up on the latest technology in cars, and especially in the driver assistance, self-driving kind of like hardware and software and the latest trend in those, and that's how I got into it really.
How widespread would you say these telematic devices you're showing are in commercial vehicles these days?
In commercial vehicles, larger fleets are, that's a very good question actually, because by the end of this year, it's mandated by FMCSA, all large commercial trucks need to be equipped with what's called an electronic logging device, ELD device. Those devices are used to track how many hours the driver has been operating, and they can print out or email or use a USB thumbstick to provide a data report of how many hours the driver has been driving to the law enforcement agency. So, by the end of this year, every single commercial trucks need to be installed with some kind of telematic device. But many of the large fleets already have them installed on trucks for, to provide them with competitive, edge to their smaller competitors. Because then you can monitor the fuel usage, you can maximize the fleet efficiency, and all that kind of stuff. So they're very prevalent.
How secure are those things?
Hmm?
How secure are those things?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your question.
Anything electronic is hackable.
Right.
Are they secure data?
Well, that's, I think you came in a little late. I was talking about, this is what my company wants to focus on. And there are researchers out there, actually, University of San Diego. They did, a bunch of researchers did some penetration testing on those devices. And they all have SIM card actually installed them. And they have a, what's it called, a cell phone number attached to those devices. Some of the devices, not like all of them, but one of the devices they're testing on, they all have a cell phone number. So you can essentially send a text to that number with a piece of code, and it'll pick it up, and it'll download its software update from an unauthenticated server. You can send any kind of firmware, push it to it, and gain access to the device internal. Then you can make it send CAN messages onto the vehicle bus to hijack the vehicle's functionality. So, I wouldn't want to say, every single one of them are insecure, but it's very likely many of them are very insecure. So.
What do you think are the best proposals out there right now to make even the telematic devices more secure? It sounds like you're not secure at all.
So, my company, my proposed company I'm thinking of is providing a one-size-fit-all kind of solution. It's like a software solution that can be embedded. That's, what is it called? Operating system agnostic and platform agnostic. That can be installed on, all those devices relatively simply. That can be, used as a firewall kind of thing to prevent the outside, unauthentic, make sure, everything is authenticated and, the things are encrypted before they can get to the device and, get access to the CAN network. And, again, I'm not really a technologically, I don't have a technology background, and I don't exactly understand, how to make sure that they are secure. But I am in the process of looking for co-founders with technological background. All right, I think we'll wrap it up then. Yeah, thanks for coming.